Welcome to Your Future Starts Now, the go-to podcast for extraordinary women who are ready to step into their next chapter with authentic confidence. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua, empowerment coach, motivational speaker, children's book author, and girl mom. Whether you're a corporate powerhouse or an entrepreneur, this show is designed for you. Your Future Starts Now is more than just a podcast. It's a movement towards rewriting the rules of success for high-achieving women. Are you ready to get unstuck and step into your next chapter? If so, you're exactly where you need to be. Your future starts now. Welcome to Your Future Starts Now. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua. I want to thank you for tuning in today. I am excited to introduce you to Whitney Faires. Whitney is an internationally recognized coach, keynote speaker, and leadership expert who empowers her clients to overcome obstacles and achieve extraordinary levels of performance with greater fulfillment. With 2 decades of experience in the healthcare industry, Whitney has built a reputation as a leading authority in developing high-performing teams and coaching industry executives worldwide. A former corporate executive and professional certified coach, she is passionate about helping people master their mindset to unlock their full potential and thrive both personally and professionally. Whitney, so happy to have you join us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Gia. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to chat with you today. So before we dig in, tell our listeners a little bit about your background and kind of what led you to the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So the work that I do today, as you mentioned, I'm an executive coach. I also partner closely with organizations to help develop their leaders. And I kind of came to this work through a very roundabout way. You know, after 20 years in med device, I had so many great experiences. But one of the things that I constantly kept coming back to as I led teams, as I launched new functions, as I supported the CFO, one thing that I kept coming back to was there were so many people that really want to have better results in their career. And maybe that's actually performing in the job. But for a lot of people, it's just feeling confident in their role, feeling like they are the title of a COO or they are the COO that matches their title, that when they show up, they are really proud of who they are and that they're poised to lead their team and to lead the organization effectively. And so, I'll back up just slightly. But I spent my first 12 years really in sales and sales leadership. And I love the job. But at one point, I kind of said, what does my next 10 years look like? Where do I want to be 10 years from now? And that was a really defining question for me because so often we jump into a career and we just keep rising because if we're good at our jobs, people want us to take on more. And that was kind of my story. But I looked at it and I said, in 10 years, I hope that I'm leading a major organization. I'm on track to become an executive. And I really felt to round out my skills, I needed to pivot to learn the corporate side of the business and not just the sales side. And so I jumped inside of our organization and I got to launch a new function to really figure out how we could offer our customers creative ways to acquire technology. And so this little idea that everyone said, we don't know if it's going to stick. We don't know if it has value, but we need someone to go try and solve this problem. My counterpart and I, Nick Santor, we built this thing into a global function over 6 years. And it was the work I was most proud of, but I missed the development and the people side that I had in sales. And actually through my development planning in that role, I decided I wanted to become a certified coach and I wanted to launch internal coaching at Intuitive, which was the company I was at the time. And then kind of the rest was history. I did the work that I loved and work that I felt prepared me for the next phase of my career. And then a job organically popped up in the org to actually do it full time. And so I spent the next 3.5 years coaching, leading org health functions, being the chief of staff to the CFO. And finally, I made the really tough decision, which is where do I want to spend the majority of my time every day? And it was on the people. And so I decided to launch my own company and finally make this dream I had years and years ago a part of my reality.
That's incredible. And I know the first time you and I had spoken, I felt very connected in the sense that our backgrounds are very similar, having, been in the corporate world in healthcare.
and then really finding our passion in helping other people to develop and really turning to that passion, right? And
Yeah.
creating that next chapter, which is very challenging, as you know, and can be very scary, but also very rewarding. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It is definitely not lost on me that I was very fortunate to have some phenomenal leaders. I also learned from some of the ones that weren't so phenomenal too,
Hmm.
in who I wanted to be and maybe who I didn't. But I also had some great mentors. And I look back on my career and I really owe a lot of my success to other people taking an active role in my development. And that's what motivates me to do what I do is not everyone is so lucky to be in a company that believes in investing in their people or
Hmm.
has the time to invest in their people. So the
Sure.
people that really want to make it a priority, they find me, and whether their company engages me or they engage me, it's a great opportunity for us to work together.
Absolutely. And, you touched upon something really important that I think resonates with our listeners that I want to go back to, which is you work hard, you get rewarded. Your reward is usually some sort of financial compensation, maybe a bigger title, but almost always more work,
Hmm.
right? And more responsibility. And, we rise through the ranks, and sometimes you even make it to, that pinnacle position of a C-suite, right? Or a vice president level. But so many of us, women and men, because I see it in both, still struggle with that crippling self-doubt.
100%.
I would love to know what your take is on that through your, either personal experience or through your professional coaching experience. Why do so many of us struggle with that, and how do we work through it?
Yeah, we could talk for hours, but why do we struggle with it? Well, just go back to the reality, and the statistics show that the average person has over 60,000 thoughts per day. Now, I will tell you honestly, I feel like I have 60,000 thoughts before noon because I get an early start to the day and trying to get the kids out the door and get ready for work and be locked in.
Yeah, sounds like
But
my brain at 2 a.m.
exactly, exactly. But truth, our minds are constantly going, even when we don't really hear what our mind's telling us. And so, what's even more interesting is that 75% of our thoughts are actually negative, and 95% are repetitive. And so, if you stop and think about that, we are telling ourselves a story on repeat. Is constant. We are telling ourselves a story. And so the first question that I started asking myself even before I found this data was like, what is that story that I am telling myself? Because I think sometimes you feel the story before you actually have the awareness to truly hear it and listen. So you feel like, I don't know if I should go for that job. You just feel off about whatever you're about to embark on, having a hard conversation. So maybe it's even something personal, right? You have to discuss something challenging with your spouse. So we feel the emotion first oftentimes, and then we hear it. And that's where you really start to be like, okay, this is that doubt creeping in. And so I think how I have always approached it, and I will tell you, this is a marathon, like an ultra marathon. It is not a sprint. All of my clients I work with, I would say almost 100% of them, we work on mindset. And some of it, it's more of that self-doubt to self-empowerment. Others, it's more awareness of it or intentionality around our mindset. But mindset it affects all of us. And it's a critical tool to continue to sharpen your skills and develop your ability to manage your mindset. But for me, and for a lot of my clients on that journey of self-doubt, it's about a couple things. One, having a really solid discipline to listening to it. Because oftentimes if we feel it, but we don't really take the time to listen because we just want to just move on, it's like brewing below the surface. So you have to confront it like you would any other conflict. So let's say that I'm debating raising my hand for a job and I'm just feeling like, I don't know if I should, I don't know if I should. And it's like, so let's have a conversation with ourselves. Like, what is going through my mind? What are my fears? What makes me think, yes, go ahead, or no, here are all the reasons why not. And then I encourage people to look for facts or evidence to prove or disprove it.
Mhm.
Because sometimes our self-doubt raises a little flag, and it's for a good reason. It's like, hey, before we go forward, let's make sure we're really tight on this thing here. Other times our self-doubt is very unproductive. I like to break it down to make it simple. Sometimes our self-doubt just tells us lies. And so the way that we can really wrap our mind around, is it real or not, is to look back in our history and go, is there evidence or any data to support that I should believe this about myself? And if the answer is no, you got to be willing to see that and say, okay, I'm going to trust that and I'm going to move ahead. And so it's these small intentional practices, the discipline of hearing it, and then also the ability to trust it, that I think set you up for success. The other thing I always like to tell people is, emotions they often get blinked as negative, like emotions in the workplace or this person's emotional. We are human. So you might as well embrace emotion. But I think the key is, especially when going from self-doubt to self-empowerment, is being able to separate the emotion from what's actually happening. We may have a lot of feelings, but it may not align with actually what problem we're trying to solve or what doubt we're trying to figure out. And so being able to separate them and say, I feel all these feelings, but here's really the situation that I'm faced with. I'm looking at raising my hand for that job and I'm afraid I'm going to fail. Okay. But I actually have raised my hand for a lot of jobs and I've been successful. So why would this one be any different? I was actually tapped on the shoulder for this job and someone said, hey, we think you'd be a great fit. Further silences that self-doubt that I can't do it and that fear. And you just look for all the things. And it's not to support your position. It's actually to help you evaluate your position. Is the self-doubt real or is it not real? And then, like I said, it's moving forward. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And I think there's so much value in what you just said and insight for those of us who struggle with those narratives, right? I think there's a couple of things I want to just highlight there. One is, like you said, our brains are wired to keep us safe, right? So we have a tendency, that negativity bias, to remember the negative experiences and not all the positive ones. So I think pausing to ask ourselves and get really curious as to what facts are supporting the story that I'm telling myself right now is important. And a lot of us don't take the time to do that, right? Because we're too busy. We're on that hamster wheel. We're going to the next thing. And it's hard to pause and reflect. Other times, to your point, the feeling that's coming up, either we're wired to think that the feeling or the emotion is bad or negative, or it can be scary. And so, oftentimes we sort of neglect that aspect of it. But the reality is our thoughts drive the emotion and the emotion is what drive our action. So if we're not really clear on what the thought is, right, then it's the subconscious stories that are going to be driving our behavior.
Yeah. And I will say that there's no mastery of this. I have so many people that I've been on the journey alongside them. I've been on my own journey and there isn't a day where I don't have self-doubt. And I would probably say there isn't a time where each day I have self-doubt that's unproductive, that I manage, but I'm still like, I'm probably just pushing that to the side for now because we are just so busy. And when you're in the middle of a call with coworkers and self-doubt creeps in, you can't just like totally pause and play it all out in your mind. But our ability to come back to that and just be on the journey of continuous improvement and know that our lives are so dynamic, that something changes personally or professionally, or there's just some influence that jars you, it's probably going to bring up all of that self-doubt again in a more intense way. And we gotta get back to reset in a neutral position on it.
Yeah, I like that. And challenging the thoughts. I also think that getting really clear on the value that you bring and being able to come back to that is super important, right? So I would love your thoughts on like kind of what is the story we tell ourselves, but what is the essence of the value that we bring to those around us and how important that story is too.
Yeah. So that's interesting because one of the things that I talk through with clients is like, tell me if you had a 30-second highlight reel, what would be in that?
Yes.
The things that when you look at, you're proud of, that make you unique, that create value for the people around you, what would be in there? And for a lot of people, it's super awkward. They're like, I'm not sure, but we have to know what our highlight reel is because guess what? When we have to step up and do something hard, we need to be able to lean on that. And I think it is so powerful when you can, it's almost a vulnerability where you're willing to say, I'm going to just for a moment, see myself through the eyes of others. Because what do we see? We see that this thing that we did went 90% well, but 10% I was bummed about the outcome. Or like I'm really proud of the progress, but it wasn't the exact result that I wanted. We see the gaps, we see the misses, but everyone else around us typically sees that the 90% that went well. And so when you can actually accept the great things that you bring, the value you create, it's really game changing for your ability to evaluate your self-doubt effectively, because you don't just see the self-doubt and hear that. You also are really high belief in all the great parts about you.
Absolutely. I think that's such great advice. That sizzle reel, right? And that's the,
Yeah,
like you said, that highlight reel, right? What are the things that you do better than anyone? And getting really clear on what your superpower is. And I think if you can anchor yourself in that, to your point, the self-doubt doesn't go away. It's always going to be there.
for sure.
Even the most successful, quote unquote, successful people experience it. And so it's really, what do you do with it? How do you work through it? And having those anchors, those, your value statement, your sizzle reel, knowing your superpowers and really knowing the value you bring to others is so incredibly powerful. So I love that.
Yeah, and I think it's as we rise in our careers, this becomes incredibly important. I mean, I think it's important at any level. I mean, I
Sure.
work on this with my kids who are 8 and 10, is managing that self-doubt. We talk about it a lot, the voice that we have in our head. But when you start leading people and then making big business decisions, whatever you do, it's imperative that you really know yourself well, that you're grounded in your strengths and your weaknesses. You know your tendencies. You can navigate that emotion. That emotional mastery is critical, because people are looking at you to lead, to help people on their journey, the same journey you're on, to make big decisions. And so I always say that the work is hard. You have to find what motivates you to just, go through the mud and just one step at a time, stumble a little bit, get back up, start to hit your groove with being able to manage that, because it's important for so many reasons. And if you are someone who wants to do more and create this, really bright future for yourself, you're going to need it.
Yeah, it's so important. So I know a lot of the work that you do is rooted in mindset.
Mhm.
So talk to us a little bit more about, the role that mindset plays in helping us to create that future we want, right? Maybe we feel stuck, maybe we're not exactly happy, or maybe we're successful on the outside, but not feeling so fulfilled on the inside. What is the role of our mindset in shifting from that self-doubt to the self-empowerment, as you said?
Yeah, yeah. Mindset is absolutely essential. And I think that we look at it and we say, okay, I can do this. Like I'll just go do the thing, and I'll be successful. And you kind of push it down, but you don't actually reframe whatever that negative thinking is into something more powerful. You have to address it, right? So there's this part of mindset that is really hard for people, because you first have to be honest with yourself. You do. You have to be honest about how you view things. And some people are more optimistic to a point that they maybe don't want to actually be aware of the potential negatives. And others, tend to be my mindset's a bit more negative, and have had to work to really reframe it and find the opportunity in all of the struggles that we face, because there is opportunity. We learn and we grow when we have a diversity, when we're doing something very hard, and when we're putting ourselves out there, there's growth in that. So the first piece of mindset, in my opinion, is really just acknowledging and owning what your mindset is, without the judgment that it's right or wrong. It just is what it is, like anything else about us. And then we can decide, what does an effective mindset look like for us, that something that's authentic to who we are, and that also is going to serve where we want to go as people and as professionals and as parents, all the aspects of our life. And I think there's just this intentionality about knowing where you are, and then knowing, okay, if I could live every day with this positive narrative, this solid mindset in my head, what would that look like? And then that gives you the ability to say, what do I have to do to get there? So it's just really essential that we're able to hear what's happening in our minds and make the choice of how we're actually going to change whatever it is that we don't like about our mindset into something that is empowering to us. The last thing I'd say on that is the power of choice is real. I was listening to a podcast that you did with, I think it was Tia Graham, right? And talking about people choose to be happy. And I totally agree with that. I think the power of choice is so significant for people. It's underestimated, because it's true. We can choose. We're going to show up for work every day after our morning has blown up with, kids and emails that started early, and you didn't get your workout in and you're not feeling yourself. We can choose. We're going to show up and be the best version of ourselves, or we can choose to really be the best we can be in that moment. And I think that it's really significant. People who have sustainable success know how to make the choices to get them where they want to go. And part of that is when we go to do the really hard things, we got to bet on ourselves. We got to choose to believe we've got this, and that everything we've done has prepared us. So just like you choose happiness, you can choose doing the hard things to propel you to the future that you want.
Yeah, I think that's such powerful advice. And drawing from your own experience, I would say, and I get asked this question a lot, but I'll ask you is, what helped you shift, right, out of your corporate job, corporate leader for so many years, right? Sometimes our identity is very tied to our job and our role. What helped you to transition into a completely new career, and really reinvent yourself?
Yeah. Wow. I wish I could give a really pretty answer to that. It was messy. It took me a long time. I had this vision of putting my passion and my purpose into people years ago. 2016 is I think when it first kind of came up, and I got some experiences with coaching in the business setting. I was an athlete my whole life, so the role, the idea of a coach and how they influence and impact people was always very near and dear to my heart. And when I saw it really come alive in the business space, it just caught my attention. And so really for probably 4 years, it was resistance. I resisted the change, and I resisted it for partially because of all the self-doubt, but because I felt it was selfish to do something that I wanted to do, but created risk for the people I cared about the most. Financially, what if it didn't work? I have to, go get a coaching certification. That's a year-long program at the time. While I was working, I was going to take time away from my kids. I had, babies at that time. And I thought to myself, I can't. It may make me happy, but it puts people I care about the most at risk. And it took some time for me to realize that I had to put myself in the shoes of, if my kids came to me and asked me this question, or if someone who worked for me came to me and asked me this question, I would say, you deserve to have the life that you want too. So the question becomes, how do you do it in a way that you're far enough outside of your comfort zone to make it happen, but you feel confident in your approach to doing that? And so it was just a long process of really confronting head on all the fears that I had. I might fail. I might not make enough money. Maybe I don't love it like I think I'll love it. And then just knocking those off one by one, managing them as they come up. And then it was like, I felt good once I had wrapped my mind around that, because I had so much planning and work put into it. I was just excited to see it finally come alive. But I will tell you, probably one of the most nervous times in my life, one of my top 10 points, was driving to the office to tell my company I was leaving. And it was because nothing was wrong. Nothing was wrong. It was my favorite job I ever did when I resigned from my corporate role. I had an amazing team. I was contributing to the development of thousands of people. The travel was a little intense. I will say that. That was a downside because I was going to California a lot. But I said to myself, like, am I sure about this? Why? But I think I was so rooted in my purpose for what I was doing next. And I just felt this pull to go do it. And so it forced me to step outside of my comfort zone and have the courage when I needed to do the hard things. And I will say, I experienced the first few months as an entrepreneur. Number one, why they say it's not for everyone. It's hard and it's lonely. It is a lonely journey. So there's an adjustment where you go from being on Zoom calls and in meetings 8 hours a day, back to back to back to back, where you have all these people surrounding you, to it's just you. And so I had to kind of pause and redefine what success looked like on a day-to-day basis, and disconnect that because I wasn't talking all day long, solving problems for other people, helping my team, that I was still, this was the new view of success, and creating those metrics and just giving myself some grace to ease into it. So it's definitely, I think, a process to disconnect your identity from whatever job or whatever thing you're doing. And I think for me, it just took a lot of time.
Yeah. I love your thoughtful and in-depth response to that, because there's a lot of power in purpose, right? And so I think that when you feel that pull, when you feel that nudge, when you feel that tug, it's so important to get curious with it, because a lot of times we just, again, keep going, keep on going. And we forget to tap back into that and really get curious with what that nudge is. So I love that you stepped into that and embraced it. And of course, it's not an easy journey, but certainly rewarding and fulfilling. So I'm glad you brought up the topic of success, because as you know, we talk about success and redefining success on this show. So Whitney, I would love to know from your perspective, how do you define success for yourself? And maybe how has that evolved for you over time?
Yeah. Well, for me, success is being able to look at the goals that I have set for myself, which some of those are metrics based, like outcome based.
Mm-hmm.
But also a lot of those revolve around how I do what I'm doing, how I'm showing up as a mom. Am I being present? My ability to, take tough news in the workplace and handle it with grace and not become overly emotional or, brought down by it. So I'm looking at not just the outcomes, but how am I getting there? And also my level of fulfillment and enjoyment in the process.
Sure.
So, I've shifted my view of success so much for a couple of reasons. The first is that I would say for the first, I don't know, 30 years of my life, sadly, so much of my view of success was either how others viewed me or the praise that I got, the visible outcomes that, okay, you won a medal, you got the job. It was all the external stuff. And I can tell you, that's quite the ride, because you're not going to get a pat on the back every time you do something good. And so it leaves all these moments where you're like, I think that was good, but they didn't notice me. They didn't say that was a great job. And I really shifted to being my own barometer for success. Do I feel good about how I did that? Am I proud of how I showed up? Did I do everything that I could to drive the best outcome? And I think you just know when it's driven internally and you're willing to tell yourself the hard truth when you weren't successful, but also acknowledge, like, I crushed that.
Mm.
That's I feel like a more balanced place to approach success from. It doesn't mean I'm not human and I don't look at somebody and think, gosh, like I wish my business was there. Of course I still compare myself at times, but I have to come back to, this is the view of success I have for myself. And am I tracking and making progress towards getting there? But the one last point I make about that is, I think too often success, we put all of our view of success in these big moments, these big milestones. And for high performers, that is exhausting, right? Because let's take like a salesperson. You have a quota for the year and, your view of success for that year hinges on what percent of that number you hit. And you could do all the right things and have, a great year, but miss by just a little. And it's like, was that not successful? Of course not. So you have to, I think, define success, not just in the big milestones, but the touch points along the way, who you are when you're doing it, and just the impact that you make on others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Two really powerful takeaways there, I would say. One is the self-validation. And for many high achieving women and men, shifting from that external validation to that internal validation is really game changing. And then the second thing that I think is really powerful in what you just said is the smaller moments and wins that we don't stop to acknowledge and appreciate the impact we're making on others along the way and who we're becoming in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. So thank you for that. Just as we wrap up, Whitney, is there's one message or takeaway you want listeners to walk away with after listening to this conversation, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say have the courage in the moments where you envision something big for yourself, to bet on yourself, to believe you can do it. I truly think that the only person that needs to believe in you is yourself. It is so great to have all these people cheering you on and telling you can do it, but it starts and stops with you. And so have the courage to get out there, go all in on yourself and chase the big things that you want in life.
Absolutely. Such great advice. Where can our listeners learn more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram, Whitney_Faires. And then, of course, on my website at whitneyfaires.com. So there's lots of good stuff on there if you take a look.
Perfect. I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing your insights and your expertise. Of course, you can visit my website at gialacqua.com, reach out on Instagram at gialacqua. Let us know what topics you'd like to hear about on future episodes. This is Gia signing off with gratitude for your time and energy. Our mic drops, but the movement continues. Until next time, your next chapter is waiting.
That concludes another empowering episode of Your Future Starts Now. Before we wrap up, I want to thank this incredible community of high-achieving women. Your energy, resilience, and commitment to growth are the driving force behind what we do. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate it, leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Your feedback fuels our mission to empower high-achieving women just like you. And of course, share your future starts now with the extraordinary women in your life who are also on a journey of healing and empowerment. Connect with us on social media, share your thoughts, let us know what topics you'd like to explore in future episodes. Stay connected on Instagram at Gia Lacqua. I encourage you to carry the energy of this conversation into your day and keep on supporting the incredible women around you. Until next time, remember, your next chapter is waiting.